You're listening to Adventures in Project Management with John Goad.
Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. I am excited to talk to you today about a topic that I have learned a lot about in the years that I've been consulting and helping with projects and people. And so I'm calling this one How to Lose by Hanging On. How to Lose by Hanging On. Man, I have so many case studies on this one that it's going to be very difficult to whittle it down to just a few. But a lot of my clients have been, I work with churches, doctors, dentists, mom and pop developers, larger developers. There's a lot of people, a vast array of entities that I work with. And so it's given me a pretty good cross-section of different clients. But one thing that's been great is I've been able to really identify commonalities or things that I commonly see, no matter who the client is. There are things you see on projects. And one of the things that I have seen is when you hang on to something too long, you're going to miss an opportunity or it's going to cost you more. That's kind of the lesson today. I had a client, a large client that was wanted to expand. They had a building. They wanted to expand it significantly in an area. They had the land. They had the drawings. They had engaged architects. They had everything that they wanted to do, but they did not have the approval of the county for their plans. And it was pretty clear early on that the county just didn't want this client building their building any bigger. They, for whatever reason, they decided that this wasn't going to happen. They just didn't want it to happen. And so my client kind of dug in, and they were right to do so in the fact that by all legal means, they should have been allowed to expand their building. They weren't breaking any laws or anything like that. But this county just didn't want it to happen. There were some people, it got to an individual battle, essentially, to where there were literally individuals who didn't want this client to build. So going through the process and rejection, for a long time, for over a year. And then it came down to litigation. My client decided to sue the county, and I believe there was a countersuit as well. And it became this long, drawn out legal battle. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent defending, and it was sad to see it unfold because, frankly, it just sucked everything out of the project completely. And what happened was ultimately, my client won. The favor of the court said the judgment was in favor of my client, which was great, but there was a stipulation. Yes, the county will need to allow you to expand your facility, and I think they had a year or a year and a half to do that. Well, unfortunately, by the time they had pursued the litigation and paid everybody they needed to pay, even though they won the case, they still exhausted a good portion of their funding for the expansion of this building. Now, they did go into another county and they built another building separately to expand what they were doing, but it basically killed the project. They hung on to this lawsuit for a long time, and it killed their project where they are now. And this was 10 years ago, and they still haven't been able to build at this existing site. So hanging on, you can lose. You can lose something when you hang on. There was another group I worked with, a medical group that wanted to build a building, and they knew they wanted a particular piece of ground, and it was very expensive, and they bought it at the height of the market, and they hung on to this idea. It was just a real stretch from day one. We had a really good architectural team and engineering and design team that put together a nice plan, but they kept they were having difficulty in filling the space. So the lender required that a certain amount of space they needed to have commitments for people to lease space within this building before completing the financing. And that proved to be a little more difficult than this client had thought, because they assumed that they would have some other doctors come and whatnot and make commitments. And everybody liked the location, and everyone liked what what we were trying to do with the building. But nobody was signing up, and time kind of wore on. We were getting closer and closer to submitting for a permit to go build this building. And as time wore on, it was just we had a few people sign up, but we needed nowhere. We needed more in order to complete the funding. And I recall that I was actually, I think, walking the plans down to the city to go submit for the permit. And I got the call that the banks had changed their mind. They had kind of changed the rules a little bit. And what happened was, this was the recession, the Great Recession was occurring, and things got really weird in the marketplace. And they said, listen, you've got to have 75% of your new proposed building committed for occupancy before we can commit to funding. Well, we were at like 25%. And there was no way in the next month or month and a half prior to construction that we were going to be able to secure those kind of commitments. And the bank wasn't willing to sit on a vacant building, hoping that tenants would come to help my client out. So they basically said, no, we can't help you. I pulled the plans, we didn't submit, and the whole deal died. It just, the groups that were going to come, the 25% people that we had filling up the building, they went other places. And my client owned this particular lot for a long time. Now, there is something to being tenacious and sticking with it if you're going to make a commitment for a project, if you're going to make a commitment for a business or a launch of a podcast or a website or something like that. You've got to stick it out. And there's going to be hard things that happen. But when sometimes it's so much of a stretch and the resources aren't there, the things just aren't coming together how you think or how they need to come together. There are indicators that you should probably change course or back down or back off in some way. And so it's hard. And I've said this before in previous episodes. It's hard when you're in the midst of the battle to see all of those things. That's why I've been in business for a long time, is I come in as a third party and I can I'm not involved in the day to day. My vision isn't clouded by some of the responsibilities and some of the distractions that are very common. And so I can come in and sometimes it looks very clear as to, an approach or the things that we need to work on. But when you're in the midst of it, I'm in the same place with a lot of my work, that I need somebody else to say, hey, have you thought about this? And so to help me make a better decision. So when we don't have some of that influence coming in, or we just want to be so tenacious, but even bullheaded that we don't want to give it up because it's our dream or it's our vision or it's the thing that we want. Sometimes a closed door opens another, and we need to be willing to know and see those closed doors. And sometimes those closed doors have significant financial repercussions. And the longer it's closed and we still push against it, the more we spend, whether it's time or money or resource or whatnot. So, if you think a closed door is coming, maybe you should rework your approach. So I have had a coaching call that I've been working with somebody, and they work for a company that has been bought out by a venture capital firm, and at first, the thought was, well, this firm is going to make some great changes, and then maybe we'll get this thing up and running, and then they're going to better, and then they'll want to sell it to a permanent home, a permanent owner. But as things kind of unfolded, what I found is that this venture capital company is basically just pulling resource out of this company. It's probably one little nut and bolt in a larger scheme of the machine kind of a thing. So, but from the perspective of my coaching client, is that I think that this thing isn't going to be stable for very long. It's not going to last for very long, and so I've been trying to encourage my guy that, hey, look at other opportunities right now, because, and I use the analogy that it seems to me like the Titanic is sinking, the band's playing, the lifeboats are gone, and so, but you're hanging on, and what's the deal with that? Why? I asked him why. Well, he's got a couple of really good reasons for that. First and foremost, he cares a lot about the people that he's working with, not just his uppers, but his peers and others that he interfaces with. He cares a ton about the clients too. And he's hanging on that maybe he can continue with some credibility, give some credibility or maintain some with the firm, even though it's slowly dying. People are being let go. It's pretty evident where this thing is going, but he's just committed to hanging on, from that aspect. And so, we got to talking about the fact that so many times we want to hang on to the right here. We want to hang on to that. And so with my first example, where the county sued and countersued and all that stuff, the here was, we've got to build here. We've got to do this. We've got to do our business the way we've always done it, and it has to happen here. And ultimately, that cost them the ability to doing here for a long time. And my second example was like the same thing. The only criteria for buying an overpriced lot was they liked the location. And I want to get into, I'm not a real estate guy, but I know that location. I understand that. I've heard that a lot. And you better be having somebody consult with you that knows about location, because most of us know nothing about location other than we might have a personal preference. But the fact that they needed that location and they paid a high price for it, which actually flowed through an increased cost to would-be tenants. So the overhead and just the cost of development at that particular site was so expensive that it was really hard to get tenants in, because they didn't want to pay the bump. When they could rent space or lease space or purchase space literally across the street for probably 30% less. I mean, why would you do that if the location wasn't even that great? Yeah, it had visibility off the highway and all of that, but it came at a premium. And so by that ownership group just auguring in, and this is where we have to do it. We bought the lot. We've got to do it. It cost them the whole project. It cost them everything, particularly when the economy started to go down and the rules changed with the banking. So it has to be here. For that, they're never going to build there at all. And so when I was talking to this coaching client, he was like, I just think that a lot of times, he said, we want it here. And it's hard to think about the there. It's hard to think about the other thing. So if you're starting a business, or if you're starting a new venture, it's really easy to get caught into that trap. Now, there is something to setting an objective and going for it and going through the hard stuff. I get that for sure. And I will preach that forever. But sometimes when the doors start closing, or when you get little indicators or red flags in your head, or the hair stands up on the back of your neck, and you think, maybe this isn't 100%. Oh, maybe it's 90, maybe it's 70% of where I think man, those are indicators to you that you may need to recalibrate. You may need to look in a little different direction. You may need to tweak something or go somewhere else. And that's easier said than done because we get so vested in our decision. We get so vested in the momentum and the moving forward and in our objective that to even think of veering can be just detrimental to our planning and all of that. But it could be in our best interest. It could just yield very positive results if we end up doing that. So back to my coaching client on the Titanic. We've made some really great progress over the last few weeks that he's really come into thinking away from the Titanic, thinking away from the ship. Now, it doesn't mean he doesn't care about his people or the clients still, but now it's almost as if he has permission to, and a responsibility, frankly, because he's got to feed his family, but have permission to think about other opportunities. And so he's been talking to some other companies that would appreciate and value his skill set and compensate for his skill set, which is huge. He's also been thinking on the creative side of maybe starting a venture like a podcast or something, which is super exciting because I think this guy's got an awful lot to offer in that department as well. And so what's great is that by seeing the Titanic slowly move, and I mean, the band's going to stop playing here pretty soon because it's going to get wet. But those are little doors that are closing to a bigger one that's probably going to be, the end of his job. But I'm confident that because this guy is looking ahead now and he's seeing that, hey, there's some other things that I need to be paying attention to. You don't want to just ride it out and hope for the best. I mean, sometimes there's no riding it out. Sometimes you see where something's going to go, and you really need to have the courage to move through that and to change course. Sometimes just a little. It doesn't have to be a huge divergence. And so I want to encourage you with that today, that sometimes we can get so wrapped up in our objective or what we think is right, or the here, the here, right here. This is what it's about right here. Don't try to talk to me or tell me otherwise. That we get so wrapped up in that not only can we miss opportunities that come our way, other opportunities, because we're so laser focused on the here, but we're bouncing these other opportunities away or repelling them. But also it can actually be detrimental to us financially, or just the brain damage of having a big loss, a huge loss. That can be detrimental to your mental health. It can stifle growth and moving forward. And so just be careful when you are so focused on an objective, when you have a piece of land, you've put a stake in the ground, even metaphorically, with your project, with your new venture, with your new job, whatever. Be willing to make minor adjustments or course correction, because sometimes those can be the best. Those can be the best decisions that we make. Okay, and I've seen this happen on so many projects over the course of my career that, and I wish I could just go on and talk about a whole lot more. There are so many other lessons, and again, I'm not using names of my previous clients. One, I haven't reached out for permission, but also I don't think it takes anything away from the lesson to be learned at all, and we can just have people. Sometimes people aren't real excited about the things that go wrong and sharing that. That's one thing that I've learned, is that if somebody is developing a project or building a building or doing something in my world that doesn't work out really well, or they had to just be drug kicking and screaming across the finish line because it was painful and it cost more than they thought, or something was wrong, the last thing they want to do is pick up the phone and call several of their peers and say, hey, look out for this. Don't do that. Which is really too bad, because that's where some of the greatest lessons lie, is in those lessons learned of the things that didn't work. I mean, frankly, my lessons learned pile of, of documentation is 90% based upon the things that didn't go right. And then we can interpret a means or a method or a way to do it right the next time. And so, so try not to be another lessons learned for what doesn't work. And don't be afraid to make those minor changes to change your course a little bit if you start seeing the doors slam. There's no shame in that whatsoever. Yeah, you might get some blowback, some people, whatnot. But if you're truly trying to do it in the best interest of your venture or your family or for yourself, you're going to take the risk of changing course a little bit. And you will reap the rewards and the benefits from doing that. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope that you heard something that was reinforcing and encouraging to you with your venture, whether you're starting a business or whatever you're approaching or doing. I hope that you heard something that helps you out today. And I just look forward to talking to you next time. And that's all I've got for today. Take care.